Hello everyone, I'm going to be talking about the 9-year Syrian War. In the year 2010, a young street vendor in Tunisia named Mohamed Bouazizi set himself on fire in protest of police brutality and poverty. Today, countries in the Middle East and their citizens are still facing extreme violence, as authorities like the government are treating them terribly. As many of you have heard, Syria has been a battlefield for a while now, but does anyone know how it started or when it started and why it is still happening to this day? It has been 9 years since the Syrian War has started. How can we assist, or how will it end? I decided to do a PowerPoint because I'm going to be talking about certain people and geography of Syria, so I thought it might help in the speech. Here's a picture of Mohamed Bouazizi. There are actually pictures of the incident of when he set himself on fire, but I thought it might be a little gruesome to include in the PowerPoint. He died a month after the protests, becoming the face of the Arab Spring, which is a movement that started and supported his purpose, protesting against unfair treatment of citizens by the government and authorities. Here's a picture of one of the protests in Egypt. It spread throughout the Middle East, eventually reaching Syria and other countries. Syrians held peaceful protests. However, in 2011, the protests ended in blood as President Assad ordered protesters to be killed. I'm sorry if I'm saying his name wrong. Syrians divided into different groups. There was the government, the Kurdish rebels, also known as the Kurds, which are in northern Syria, and they fought against ISIS and the government, and there were the rebels, which were in the rest of Syria, fighting against ISIS and the government as well. As the situation progressed, the Islamic State, also known as ISIS, became involved. Picture of the President Assad. Here's a picture of the Syrian flag. The Syrian War started in July 2011, 1 month after the peaceful protests. Soon enough, countries like the United States and Russia became involved, as well as other countries. There was an army formed, known as the FSA, which stands for Free Syrian Army. The main countries that were and still involved with the Syrian War are Turkey, Russia, Iran, Israel, and the United States. Turkey has taken in many Syrian refugees, being one of the neighboring countries. But the country sided with President Assad, who has been the cause of most of the fatalities by using chemical weapons. Russia stood behind Assad for Syria, for Syria is Russia's key to the Middle East. However, Russia and Turkey have come to agreements with each other and the United States to help improve Syria's situation, which is the opposite of what Assad is doing, which is ironic, for he is their president. Instead, the Syrian president is provoking more violence and blaming it on the other groups who want justice for the country. The groups being the rebels and the Kurdish. Iran, an old ally of Syria, stood behind Syria in hopes that the country could help them fight their dominating neighbor, Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia's influence seemed to spread more in the Middle East, which Iran felt threatened by. Also known as Israel's oldest and greatest enemy, which is Iran, southern Syria has become a battlefield for Israel and Iran. When Obama was president, he sent forces over to Syria to help the Kurdish fight against the terrorists and tried to bring attention to the cause and started a humanitarian campaign. On April 16th, during Trump's presidency, After removing U.S. forces from Syria, Trump launched airstrikes on the airbase where the chemical weapons were used during the chemical attacks. At this airbase, this is where the chemicals were based. And these were the chemical weapons that President Assad started using on Syrian citizens. Here's a picture of the Islamic State group, also known as ISIS. Today, there is not much progress in Syria's situation. Thousands are dying, a majority being children, because feuding countries have thrown innocent citizens into the middle of their conflicts. Not only feuding countries, but feuding groups. Thankfully, with the help of the United States, rebelling groups of Syria, Turkey, and Russia, the Islamic State group has lost most of its major territories, causing for the group to be driven out of the country. In the next slide, I'm going to have a map of all the territories split up in Syria. However, the terrorist group still remains a threat. Chemical weapons are still being used on innocent citizens, and because it is difficult to stop, there are many ways we, the rest of the world, can help. Though the United States, Turkey, and Russia are occupying one of the borders, helping more than 1 million refugees settle down, the rest of Syria remains a war-torn country. We may not be fighting for Syria anymore, but there are other ways we can help. Donating anything helps, whether it is money, clothes, or medical supplies, because at the end of the day, innocent people are suffering. This affects the world because any situation where innocent people are dying for a problem that's between other people, not even them, is just truly heartbreaking because they're thrown into the mix for something they were not involved in, something they didn't do. Syria has been a battlefield for 9 years now, and many of its citizens are losing hope in that light at the end of the tunnel. Here's the map of all the territories in Syria. So the Syrian rebels, as you can see, they don't have as much property anymore, but they're a little more up north. And they have a little bit of property near where most of the Syrian government is. Then there's the Kurds, also known as the Kurdish forces. And they are northern Syria. And then there's Turkey-based Syrian rebels and Turkish military. They're right by the border, not too far from Turkey. And as you can see, there's no more ISIS because they were driven out of the country. In this picture, there's a man, he's overlooking Syria. And though it's not stated if this man is part of ISIS, if he's part of the rebel groups, or if he's part of the Kurdish, the government, but it's just, I can imagine seeing this from anyone's perspective. And just seeing that the whole country is just damaged and has gone through so much. There's something in the Quran that stood out to me, and it says, whoever kills an innocent person, it is as if he killed all of humanity. And I think that in any situation, that line should be taken into consideration. Thank you for your time, and that concludes my speech.